Most secrets in a marriage don't begin with dramatic moments. They begin with small things. A quiet change in routine, a door closing softly, a phone screen lighting up in the dark. At first you ignore those things because the person involved is someone you've trusted for years. That's exactly what I did. Until the night I watched my wife walk out of our house at midnight, thinking I was asleep. My name is Daniel. I'm 48 years old, and my wife Laura and I had been married for 20 years. 2 decades together teaches you a lot about a person, their habits, their moods, even the way they breathe when they sleep. Which is why I knew something was different long before I saw her leave that night. The change started quietly. Laura began staying up later than usual. She would sit in the living room scrolling through her phone long after I had gone to bed. When I asked about it, she always gave simple answers. Just reading news. Talking to a friend. Trying to relax. Nothing suspicious on the surface. But after 20 years together, you develop instincts about the person you share a life with. And my instincts kept telling me something was off. One night around midnight, I woke up thirsty and walked toward the kitchen. That's when I noticed the front door closing gently. Through the hallway window, I saw Laura walking down the driveway. She didn't notice me standing in the shadows of the house. She got into her car and drove away. I stood there confused. It was midnight on a Tuesday. Laura had never done something like that before. When she came back about 40 minutes later, I was already back in bed pretending to sleep. She moved quietly through the house, like someone trying not to wake another person. The next morning I asked casually, "Did you go somewhere last night?" Laura didn't hesitate. "No, I went to bed early." The lie came out so smoothly it almost impressed me. That was the moment I realized something important. If she was lying about leaving the house, then asking questions wasn't going to get the truth. So instead of confronting her, I started paying attention. Over the next week, the same thing happened 3 more times. Around midnight, Laura would quietly get up from bed, slip on a jacket, grab her keys, and leave the house. Every time she believed I was asleep. Every time she returned less than an hour later. And every time the next morning she acted completely normal. No explanation. No mention of going anywhere. After the 4th night, curiosity finally turned into determination. The next time she left, I decided to follow her. I waited a few minutes after she drove away before grabbing my own keys. The streets were quiet that late at night, which made it easy to spot her car. She wasn't driving across town. She wasn't going anywhere far. In fact, she stopped only 5 blocks from our house. At a small park. Laura parked near the entrance and got out of the car. I stayed back far enough that she wouldn't see me. From my distance, I could see someone already sitting on one of the benches. A man. My first thought was the obvious one. My wife was meeting someone. But when she walked closer, the situation suddenly looked very different. Laura sat beside the man and immediately started crying. Not quiet tears. Real crying. The man placed a comforting hand on her shoulder and spoke calmly to her. Even from a distance, I could see the conversation was serious. For nearly 30 minutes, they talked under the dim park lights. Eventually, Laura hugged him and walked back toward her car. I waited until she drove away before stepping closer to the bench. The man was still there. When he looked up at me, his expression showed mild confusion. "Can I help you?" he asked. I studied his face for a moment. He looked older than Laura, probably in his late 50s. "Do you know Laura?" I asked. "Yes," he replied. Then he asked something that surprised me. "You must be Daniel." That answer stopped me completely. "You know who I am." He nodded. "She talks about you a lot." My confusion grew deeper. "Who are you?" I asked. The man stood up slowly. "My name is Mark," he said. "I'm her therapist." That sentence hit me harder than anything I had imagined. "Therapist?" Mark nodded calmly. "She's been seeing me for a few weeks." I stared at him, trying to process what he was saying. "Why meet here at midnight?" "Because she didn't want you to know." The answer made more sense than I expected. Mark explained that Laura had been struggling with anxiety for months. The children leaving home soon had triggered something she hadn't anticipated. For nearly 20 years, her identity had revolved around being a mother. Now that role was slowly changing, and she didn't know who she was without it. "She's afraid you'll think she's falling apart," Mark said. I felt a strange mix of relief and guilt. Relief because my wife wasn't secretly seeing another man. Guilt because she felt she couldn't talk to me about something so important. "Why didn't she just tell me?" I asked. Mark shrugged slightly. "Sometimes the people we love most are the hardest ones to be honest with." I drove home slowly that night. Laura was already back in bed when I walked inside. She pretended to be asleep, but I could tell she was awake. The next morning, I sat across from her at the kitchen table. "Laura," I said calmly. She looked up. "Yes, I know about the park." Her face went pale instantly. "You followed me." "No," I said quietly. "I met your therapist." For a moment, she looked like she might cry again. "I didn't want you to see me like that," she whispered. I reached across the table and held her hand. "You don't have to hide your struggles from me." Laura looked down. "I didn't want you to think I was weak." I smiled slightly. "After 20 years of marriage, I've seen you at your strongest." I squeezed her hand gently. "And I'm not going anywhere when things get hard." Laura exhaled slowly, like someone finally putting down a heavy weight. That night, she didn't sneak out of the house. Instead, we sat together on the porch and talked for hours. About the kids leaving, about the future, about the parts of our life that were changing. Because sometimes the things we assume are secrets are really just fears someone doesn't know how to share.